everybody. Sorry for the few minutes delay here. We are trying a new format, and it's called the New Nerd Herd. And what we decided to do is we had been doing some webinars the last probably 6 months or so. And, we kind of felt like just presenting slide decks and things like that really wasn't showing, number one, our personalities and getting more engagement from you, the viewer and listener. So we thought we'd just kind of keep it more casual, more conversational, more relaxed, to where you can feel like you can answer or ask any question. It could be as hard as you want it to be to try to stump us, or as easy as, why does my computer hate me? So there are no questions off limits. So feel free to comment with any comments or questions or what have you throughout the whole presentation or webinar. And this is not scripted, as you can tell. And we will have some main topics each month, but feel free we can take the conversation wherever you guys want to take it, and you're open to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dave Bloom, my partner in crime here at Trumbull. He is the brains behind all of the technical operations. And then we also have Elmer Robinson, part of our team. He's a CISSP, which is very nerd-like, right, Elmer?
It is, yeah.
Whenever you have acronyms in the back of your name, you know you're a nerd, right?
Right.
And then I'm here as your moderator to make sure that Dave and Elmer don't get too caught up in their nerd talk and completely lose the audience. So I'm kind of the normal person, if you will, the non-nerd, to keep it flowing. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about Office 365. We feel like there's a lot of information regarding Office 365 and security and default settings, and I really think this is a super relevant topic because I feel like with COVID, with people working remotely and they had to pivot, I hate that word pivot, but we had to pivot in 2020. And I think in doing that, a lot of people signed up for Office 365 so they could work remote and have everything in the cloud. And I feel like there's kind of some misunderstandings and confusion that we kind of wanted to talk about. So I'm going to let Elmer start the conversation.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that. Boy, I used to start these conversations with a lot of information to try and get people on board with why cybersecurity was important. But these days, I don't really need to begin that conversation there. Everybody kind of understands why it's important. You hear the headlines, you have friends that are impacted. Maybe you've been impacted yourself. And so the importance of cybersecurity gives us a good starting point for this conversation. But back in the old days, I tell the story that it used to be all about viruses, right? The bad guys just kind of wrote automated code and they would send it out to just attack anything it could find. And your best defense was antivirus software. If you had a good antivirus platform in place, you were probably protected, right? But that's not the way any of this really works anymore. And Dave can back me up on this. The percentage of time that you really have a virus trip an antivirus software is pretty minimal these days. The bad guys, in fact, they've got a guaranteed win. They almost don't need to mess with viruses because they have a guaranteed win. And that guaranteed win is email. And so I want to just talk a little bit about that and make sure everybody has their head around that, the importance of email and securing email. It really, this day and age, is the primary attack vector that the bad guys are going to use to get in. And I talked about it being a guaranteed win for them. If you think about it, consider, for instance, a busy accounting firm. And in the middle of tax season, let's call it March, when everyone in the firm is working 16-hour days, 7 days a week to try and get done by the deadline, and there's paperwork stacked to the top of the cubicles in every desk and every office is full. The phone's ringing off the hook. Every person at their desk is waiting for a receipt from somebody. And when that email comes into the inbox that just says, here are the documents you've been waiting for, who's going to click that? Who's going to open that email? Who's going to maybe click even the attachment that might be present in that email? There may not even be an attachment. It's not necessary these days.
That's what I was going to say, Elmer. Isn't that kind of the trend now? Is now it's not even a matter of clicking on something in the email, but just the fact if it makes it to your inbox.
If it gets to your inbox, exactly.
Yeah,
There
that's
are
kind of scary.
yeah, it's scary because there's code that can execute that's attached to maybe an image that's they can put a logo in the email that runs code when the email gets previewed. You don't even have to double click on it and open it. You might be scrolling through your inbox and you've got preview on in the preview pane, and it'll execute the code that's attached to that image. And I mentioned, the antivirus software used to be the main defense, but that just never goes off anymore. The fact is that it just never goes off. The bad guys walk past the antivirus software.
We actually had we had an HVAC guy on a consultation once. Remember that, Dave? Where he said it looked like an email from QuickBooks. He didn't even click on anything because he could tell that it wasn't really from QuickBooks, but it didn't matter because that month when he sent out his invoices to all his clients, they had somehow got into his QuickBooks they must have forwarded his email as well, to where when they changed the bank account information within his QuickBooks,
wow,
they were able to confirm the changing and all of that. So he sent out his invoices and he wasn't receiving payments because it was going into a different bank account, and he wasn't able to recover his funds from the bank or QuickBooks. So I mean, it's kind of scary. And to your point, if you're just relying on antivirus right now, that's not enough. I mean, the tools that we're using actually proactively go out and, it's looking at the telemetry of your device to say, hey, somebody's trying to log in from X, Y, and Z, and that's not normally you. And so, I mean, if you just simply have antivirus anymore, it's just not enough. It's kind of like having an AOL email account still, right?
Right, exactly. Or a fax machine, as
yeah, exactly, right. Yep.
The bad
so
guys
it's not bad to have, but that's not,
So it's still the first line of defense. Like, nobody's
Right.
suggesting you get rid of your antivirus software. That's the basic that needs to be in place. But the bad guys don't play in that space much these days. They send you an email. It's got code that's embedded in a graphic or an attachment that can execute without any action taken. And it's not going to write anything to disk. So it's going to execute strictly in memory, and it's not going to write anything to disk that's going to trigger an antivirus software. And what it will do is just ping the bad guy, really, is what it does. It opens up a back door so that even if you reboot your computer, the bad guy can get back in, and then it phones home. And the bad guy comes in the next day, sits down at his desk with his morning cup of coffee, and he's got a blinking light that says somebody clicked. And then he's about 2 or 3 clicks away from launching his main attack against you. His tools are so sophisticated and efficient that he doesn't really do much work or invest much time. He may not have any skills. He may be paying for the entire bad guy solution that he's running on his desk and not really have any programming skills at all. He's just a customer to the company that provides the solution. And that's the typical bad guy these days. So
Yeah.
everybody's
Have you seen any
vulnerable.
trends this like in the last 30, 60 days from support tickets or anything? I mean, I know Microsoft has had their share of outages in general in the last few weeks, but have you kind of noticed anything from our clients on support tickets, the stuff that's going on with security or emails?
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, security is always a concern, right? So just, the amount of volume that we've got coming in, this isn't a enterprise issue. This isn't a small business issue. Threat actors are pretty indiscriminate in terms of who they're going after. So whether it's a phishing attempt or social engineering via LinkedIn, any entry point, again, specifically email is probably the most vulnerable in terms of, coming into the organization. Everybody's multitasking these days. Nobody's, really looking at the sending address. So there's a pretty good chance if you're multitasking, not paying attention, some of the, minor things in terms of, that would jump out and say that this is a red flag or often looked. And that's what, these threat actors are counting on. So a lot of the time we'll come into a new environment, we'll install our security tools. Folks may have 365 or G Suite and, everything's fine, not aware of any issues. But at the same time, our tooling is able to, discover previous threats, right? So what you were talking about previously, Rebecca, with, the auto forward rules and, emails going into certain folders, those are very indicative of past breaches. And our tooling has the ability to essentially surface that and pick that up. So, again, a lot, once threat actors kind of get into your 365 or G Suite environment, they're going to build a foothold. And again, it may start with email, but again, that's going to start moving laterally across that environment. What other documents can they get, on G Drive or SharePoint?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think too, like, I mean, obviously I don't have the tech background that you two nerds do, but like, honestly, I didn't even realize people could get into your device and forward emails. You know what I mean? Like, I think that in and of itself, most people don't really realize, that's even a thing that people are doing. And that's how
Let's talk about that for just a second, because it's really an important point. Historically, you used to run all of your software on your local computer. Everything was kind of contained. You could build a big wall around it and try and keep the bad guy out. But now everything's in the cloud, right? Everybody's just got a service that they're subscribing to. And so, you're depending on Microsoft then. If you're using Office 365, for example, are you just blindly accepting that Microsoft is a secure environment? Because cloud computing is just someone else's computer. Like, there's no fairy dust that makes it automatically safe and secure to put all of your data on someone else's computer. And we learned this lesson the hard way. In the original ransomware attacks, when data was just encrypted wholesale, and people would turn to cloud vendors, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and say, boy, all my data just got encrypted. Can you help me put it back? And the answer at the time was, no, we can't help you put it back. Like, you're the one that has to back up and secure your data. We don't. That's usually right in the license agreement, that it's the end user's responsibility to back up and secure their own data. And so backup is a separate topic that we could talk about as critically important, but
that could be its own topic for
it's its own topic. But securing your data, I want to talk specifically about Office 365, because we could touch on all the other vendors as well. But Office 365 has the majority of the market share, and Microsoft is really good at one thing, and that as a network administrator, a technician, a security guy, I love the fact that they give me a checkbox for everything. They make settings available at a very granular level. There's a checkbox. You can turn everything in there on and off. And that's great. The problem is they don't get the settings right to start with. Like they have a lot of things that are just obvious good settings that are off by default, and people don't understand that. So when I said in the license agreement, it probably says it's your responsibility to secure and back up your own environment. The truth is that people assume it's starting out secure, and it's not. It's starting out very insecure. In fact, we do scans. One of the things that we do for our customers is look at their environment kind of from the outside as an expert. Even in some cases, we assume the hacker role and try and penetrate the environment from the outside. Some of our scanning tools look at the Office 365 environment. And so when a customer engages us to scan them for cybersecurity posture, we'll look at their Office 365 environment. We do them over and over again, and we find there are very similar like groups of findings that come back to us every time we run the scan. And it's not a couple, it's not a handful, it's not 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 things that need to get the checkboxes checked. It's 15, 20, 25 really crazy security settings, things that would blow your mind. In fact, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of technical details, but I think all I have to do is read a couple of the common findings. I'll give you the name of the finding and a brief description of what it does, and you'll kind of get where I'm coming from on this. One of the findings that we find over and over again in Office 365 environment is an unimplemented Microsoft control that's called set safe attachments to block mode. The description says, safe attachments in block mode prevents messages with detected malware from being delivered. To me, that sounds like a pretty good thing. Prevents messages with detective malware from being delivered. The messages are quarantined and only administrators can review. That's a best practices checkbox, and it's off by default. So safe attachments is off. That means that messages with detected malware attachments are being delivered. And we find this over and over again.
Yeah.
It's turn on common attachments filter, that it filters out things like executables. Turn on Microsoft Defender, which is off by default for Office 365 and SharePoint and OneDrive. Block download of untrusted executables and exploited drivers. These are things that are obvious yeses, that are best practices to turn on, and we find them off by default as a rule. Now, Microsoft has done a much better job lately, because we used to find 40 crazy things that we had to correct, but we still find in the 20s, kind of in that neighborhood, 15 to 20 things for every customer that we scan. So the lesson is that it's really not secure by default. And you have to assume that there are vulnerabilities that are present in that, and kind of take ownership and talk to an expert about what you can do to make sure your email, your SharePoint, your OneDrive is secured and backed up.
So let me ask you this. So let's say you get a Microsoft Office license 4 years ago. Does it automatically update to the most current settings and license? Because you pay it monthly or annually. So does it?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay.
So I said that Microsoft has improved the game. About 2 years ago, they implemented a default package of settings. it's a system security checkbox that when you check it, it turns on a whole bunch of these default settings. And that's why we went from 40 findings to 20 findings, because they implemented that new default setting, and it helped, but it's still a significant problem. I said that was a few years back. Prior to that, the default settings were such that we find 40-ish security vulnerabilities. So the settings that you have in place would be determined when the license was provisioned. So when you talked to the person you got your Microsoft Office 365 license from, and they said, okay, here's your login, here's your name, that thing was provisioned at that time, and it was provisioned with the default settings that were present at the time.
Okay, so they're definitely not up. So even though we're paying them, every month, it's not like they're automatically updating
No,
anything in the background.
they don't automatically do anything. They don't back your data up. They don't secure your environment. They don't roll your settings forward. And
Okay.
and typically it gets so it's worse than that, because as new vulnerabilities come along, they implement new little check boxes, right, to tighten things up, and they throw the settings into the environment, the options, I mean, they give the dialog box and the check box, but they don't roll out a new recommended default setting across the platform. In some cases, it would kind of be disastrous if they did, if it was something that blocked access to features that people commonly use.
Yeah.
It would create havoc. But the point is that, again, it's your responsibility to secure your environment and back up your data, because Microsoft's not doing anything but letting you log into their computer. That's all.
So then I have a really basic question for Dave, because you always are doing the procurement of licensing for clients and stuff like that, not myself. So if someone goes out and purchases an Office 365 license, is it obvious for them, or do you feel like when you get a license, you're just, okay, cool, I got my license, so I'm going to start working in Word and Excel and blah blah blah? Or is it easily seen that these people need to like go through and check these security settings themselves, or is it kind of like most people just sign up and like start working?
Most people sign up and start working, right? So license is not tied to security settings, right? So the security settings for Office 365 and I'm going to take a broad leap here. Google is probably going to be pretty similar. The security settings are going to be implemented, right, based on the standards at the time the tenant is created, meaning this is a new tenant. I want to set up, email for, my super secret website.com. I'm going to go ahead and create the tenant, do the registration, link my custom domain, and add my email. So when that tenant is actually created is when those security settings are applied, and that is a snapshot in time based on best practices. And per Microsoft, those are continuing to evolve. I mean, obviously, security is a moving landscape. Very rarely do you see Microsoft going back and changing settings out of the gate, right? So one of the few that we've seen is obviously MFA. And conditional access with regard to Office 365, right? So, I mean, as Elmer would say, it's kind of a no-brainer just in terms of, making sure that those are enabled. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. One of the things that Microsoft has done really, really well, to give them credit, is their backwards compatibility and their ability to essentially ensure applications, workflows, business workloads across their Windows desktop and server environments, as well as their Office 365 environment. Again, they have maintained backwards compatibility on purpose. At the same time, because of that compatibility, they are not typically the fastest to implement new security features, right? So again, making sure MFA is turned on, right? So disable.
And that's a big one. I'm going to jump in there for that one because just having MFA turned on, if you have cybersecurity insurance and you're checking that box and you need to file a claim, you'll get denied.
Mhm.
So
Correct.
that's like that's a big one in my opinion, is make sure your MFA is turned on if you have cyber insurance, because if it's not, you're wasting your money paying for your premiums because
Yeah.
they're going to
And
deny
that's,
it. And that's as simple as clicking that box, right? That says, hey, turn
Right.
this off.
And again, that's low hanging fruit, but right to Elmer's example, right?
Right.
All of the stipulations, right? We can have you can share content in a Teams meeting with external users, right? I mean, that's all the way, data or privileged information could leave your organization if you're not paying attention, right? So
Yep.
settings like that are typically turned on by default. And, again, without going through all the settings that Elmer's referring to with the fine-tooth comb, there's multiple ways that data can leave the organization. There's multiple ways that threat actors can penetrate and gain access into that environment. And again, when those settings are set, it's a snapshot in time based on Microsoft's best practice. And that, again, that's always an evolving standard. But again, if Microsoft moves that standard, they don't necessarily go back and retrofit existing tenants, if that makes sense. So,
And we actually have some questions and comments. So I don't want to feel like we're ignoring the audience when we're asking them for questions. So I'm going to start with the second question just because we moved on from the phishing emails, but I promise we will get to that one. If Microsoft has all of these security vulnerabilities due to settings off by default, are we better off using Mac or Linux? Or are there obvious vulnerabilities there too if we use Office 365 products on those operating systems? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. The vulnerability is, do you use email? Honestly, it's not operating system dependent anymore because the main attack vector is email. And so if you use email, if you visit websites, that one of the original breaches that I had to troubleshoot was executed when a user had their homepage set to Yahoo, and the Yahoo ad server was sending out infected images. And so they didn't click or touch anything. They just opened up their web browser, their default Yahoo homepage popped up. It executed a script that ran a virus on their computer, which infected the company network. And so it's not really, it's such a platform independent kind of a thing. If you're getting email, you're really got a target on your back, and that's everybody, right? Who's not getting email these days? So I don't know. What do you think, Dave? Any difference based on platform?
You're the Mac guy, Dave. Oh, where'd he go?
Still here? No, 100% agree. Right? It's device agnostic. At the end of the day, your Office 365 environment can get compromised without you actively being signed into any device. Right? Your data's in the cloud. Right? So to Delmer's point, cloud is just another synonym for somebody else's computer. You might have an account, you might have your data up there, you might not necessarily be logged in, you could be on a plane and your computer or your data in Office 365 is still potentially available from an attack surface footprint. So again, obviously, it's good to keep whatever device that you're running, Mac, Windows, Linux, mobile, Android, Windows, whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter, right? So again, keeping the device up to date with the latest security patches is obviously important. Making sure that you've got antivirus and next gen antivirus and EDR, such as Huntress, for that level of protection is always a good idea. But with regard to cloud and Office 365, it really doesn't mitigate regarding the operating system that you're personally using from a desktop or mobile operating system. Doesn't negate the security risk, if that makes sense.
Don't you kind of feel like Mac users sort of feel like they are invincible?
Is that just the confidence that I portray?
Again, viruses
And
are
I'm
not.
saying that because I know Dave is a Mac user, but I'm just saying, don't you kind of feel like, because, Apple kind of stands on that, hey, nobody's getting through our stuff and you don't have to worry about that. And, that's kind of, I feel like at least, 10 years ago or
Yeah,
something,
that's pretty
sort of
old
true,
knowledge.
right?
Yeah, it's
And
not true at all.
I feel like that's still in people's minds of, oh, well, I got a Mac. I don't need to worry about
I'm
stuff.
safe. I'm running Mac.
Yeah, and
Safe.
that's kind of scary,
We
because I
just
think
got done
it
talking
may be
about
harder
how
to
it's.
convince that they actually need these things and have vulnerabilities because
Yeah,
The need is there regardless of the platform, right? Where a lot of this kind of comes in is Apple has always been kind of second or third fiddle depending on the marketing cycles. Windows and Microsoft obviously has the volume of the desktop, and to some degree server operating system environment, right? So again, if a threat actor is going to do something malicious and I want to take advantage of the what's out there, again they're going to have a broader market or base leveraging Windows. So again, this is where Microsoft has definitely stepped up over the past several years and improved their security game. Again, they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Neither is Apple, right? I don't think anybody is infallible in this, right? There is no such thing as 100% bulletproof solution. I go back to the Titanic, right? The unsinkable ship. Well, it sank, right? It can happen to Apple, can happen to a Windows user, it can happen to Linux. None of them are without vulnerabilities. That being said, Apple's market share is typically a little bit smaller. I think Apple is a little bit more aggressive with regard to their security settings and policies. And at the same time, they don't have that legacy corporate enterprise base that they need to cater to, right? They've never claimed to be backwards compatible. They've always kind of moved forward. So them in terms of trying to maintain 10-year-old software that's still running on a modern A series processor or Apple Silicon doesn't necessarily matter, right? Their mantra is, well, this is where we're at, keep up or move on. Where Microsoft has done, for better or for worse, kind of allowed that latitude for legacy software to continue. It's again, they're not indifferent or less secure. I think a lot of that is, again, marketing. I think a lot of that's the advertising and, folks that are spinning that. But again, your Macintosh is just as vulnerable as a Windows machine.
I think that's a great point to bring up as far as Mac and their target audience, right? It's a little different. And
I
speaking
mean, the
of
fact
Mac,
is, if you click the link in the email, it doesn't matter what computer you're on, you're
true.
had, right?
Yep.
So if you click the link in the email, it doesn't
So
matter what platform you're on.
I'm going to prove that this is unscripted by asking this question because the only thing it relates to is the fact that we're talking about Macs. So someone actually did ask me wanted to ask this question during this session. So is it true that when you purchase a newer MacBook that you can't upgrade memory in it like you could do in like previous years? Is that true? Like, do you pretty much like if you're running out of memory, do you need to go out and buy a new MacBook or can you still
Yes.
upgrade? Okay.
And that's Apple has been notorious for better or for worse. Personally, the serviceability has decreased exponentially on Apple products over the past I would say decade. That the trend is just again they're essentially disposable devices, unfortunately. A lot of vendors, not all, but a lot of vendors have followed that trend. So you'll find laptops from LG, Asus, HP, even Lenovo also have models that are essentially non-serviceable. So, again, depending on the needs, that's one thing that you need to factor when you're purchasing hardware is serviceability, right? So, again, if you're saving $100 at the time of purchase, is $100 going to be worth the cost of disposing of that or, having to upgrade in 3 years versus 5 or 6? So, obviously those decisions we're happy to help with when procuring hardware.
Okay. It looks like we have another question. So I'm going to float back to talking about phishing emails. So we're definitely going all over the place, which was awesome, which is why we wanted to do it this way, right? If phishing emails are the most common ways we are attacked these days, what are some red flags to look out for in any given email? Or do we need an automated system to scan everything for us? I think both, right? I mean, I think there are definitely some things to look out for that are red flags. And obviously we would love if you wanted to use a automated scanning that we happen to have. But
I, uh,
I'll
I
let the
think,
nerds answer this, but that there are definitely red flags. Like red flags for me are if there's urgency to an email,
yeah,
if I'm not expecting an email, if you know, like customer service is so non-existent nowadays that if a vendor you use is all of a sudden is proactively telling you about something that with urgency, it's probably fake, or I at least go to their website and check it out myself, or I don't call any of the information on the email, but I would call like my direct numbers that I have with vendors. So those are things that just anyone should be doing on a regular basis in their inbox. But I'll let you guys talk about your thoughts and opinions on that question.
the bad guys, I'll just weigh in on that for just a second. Um, it used to be that in terms of like video technology, it was the porn industry that took advantage of every new advancement. The bad guys, in terms of IT, are the ones that leverage and push and take advantage of every new advancement. And AI is out there now. And it used to be that you could sort of trust your spidey senses, right? Like the email didn't smell right, there was a word spelled wrong, they weren't using English in the right way. There was something that would trigger you to realize there was a problem there. But these days, AI has improved to the point that they can not only send you an email from your bank that looks perfect, but they can send you an email from your boss that sounds like your boss wrote the email. There have been recorded instances of millions of dollars being transferred when malicious actors leveraged video spoofing technology to convince an company officer to transfer millions of dollars because he thought he was talking to people that had the authority to authorize that. And they were malicious actors using AI to spoof the video. So um, I'm not sure just trusting your spidey sense is enough. Although I think everybody has to really sharpen their spidey senses and become kind of hyper aware around cybersecurity. Like videos, we're learning that you can't believe everything you see and everything you hear. And so I think it's critical that people are really suspicious and plugged into that and don't trust everything that comes in front of them. But I'm just going to say that talking to Dave about some solutions that not only filter what's coming in, you want something that's going to look at the incoming email and do its very best job of keeping the bad stuff out.
Yeah.
So you need a good, effective filtering solution. At the same time, you have to know that something's coming through and that someone's going to click. And what happens then? And is there a solution for that event? And there is. It used to be really expensive stuff that's now affordable for the small and medium-sized marketplace to have a solution that not only filters out the bad stuff, but also provides like a detonation environment. So when you click on the link, it actually sends the click out to a cloud-based execution environment where it tests the link to make sure it's not malicious before it allows the click to continue internally on your system.
Well, and the added benefit too is, everybody's inboxes get so junked up.
Yeah.
with email, to where it's kind of nice to have that filter, because you're not having to search through, 100 emails every morning to get to the ones that you care about for your business.
Yeah.
So, I
To
mean,
get to the
that's
7
just sort of an
important.
added benefit too. It's a time save. So, let's see. Dave, did you have any comments or on that, or did you want me to move on to the next question?
No, I think you guys covered it. I
Okay.
don't have anything additional on that.
Look at me. I'm learning stuff from you guys. I'm going to be a nerd soon. All right. If our data is vulnerable on the cloud, should we have an offline backup for everything as well? Yes, I know that answer. Any good solutions for something like that?
Putting that to
Dave?
Dave.
Yep.
You want me to answer that? Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. So we use a product, and there's several out there, but the product that we use is from a company called Enable. We use a data protection product called Cove. And what that basically allows us to do is we can do device backups, from a Linux desktop server to, Windows desktop server, as well as, Mac desktop. So from a physical device, we can back that up. We can essentially capture system state as well. And that allows us to do some neat things, right? So for businesses that have traditional workloads that don't run well in cloud, right? So think, on-premise server infrastructure. We can essentially back up all of that infrastructure to the cloud and have your data available from a point-in-time recovery. That also gives us the ability, we can set different retention based on compliance, right? So financial companies that have, tax, financial forms or client data are regulated a little bit differently, a little bit stricter. So typically it's around 7-year retention from a look-back perspective. So making sure that we can actually recover data as it was 7 years ago, we can essentially do that. The neat thing with Cove is we can also take that laptop or device or server, right? So again, I'm here in Charleston. We're right on the coast. Hurricanes are a thing. So if I've got my business here in Charleston, we've got a hurricane coming up the coast, and my physical office is flooded, fire, act of God, whatever. Getting that data back into a operational standpoint is critical, right? So one of the neat things that Cove can do is can actually take that backup and we can actually spin that up as a virtual device in the cloud. So, pipe burst, hurricane, whatever, my physical infrastructure is down. I can't run my business because I've lost my either desktops or server infrastructure. We can restore that to the cloud and essentially get you back up and running pretty quickly versus what it would take to procure new hardware and recover off of those cloud backups. So that's something we can definitely do. The other aspect that Cove allows us to do is at this point it's specifically to Microsoft 365. I know they are in beta for Google Workspace, but for clients that are leveraging the Microsoft Cloud 365, we also have the ability for backing up everything in that Office environment, right? So when I say Office environment, I'm talking Exchange, Outlook, emails, Teams conversations, OneDrive, as well as SharePoint. And again, we can get granular with that, right? So again, we'll have a backup rolling 30 days. And again, we have levers to pull from a compliance perspective, but essentially we can go back to a point in time from an inbox, right? So, what was that email, before it got deleted, or what was that email that, that got sent out that was moved to the recycling bin and deleted? We have the ability to basically recover that, point in time. So again, from an email perspective, from a Teams conversation, SharePoint, OneDrive, there's lots of levers that we can pull in terms of, recovery. Now, the nice thing with that, I will say, is that, Microsoft is not obligated to back up or restore your data, right? So that's essentially on you as the business owner or tenant owner for Microsoft. So a lot of the times what we've seen is billing issues where a credit card just is added to the tenant and somebody forgets about it with secondary email address is a Yahoo account or AOL or something that somebody kind of forgets about. So those notices that a credit card or billing payment has expired, sometimes end up in, off into the ethers. So typically, if there's a billing issue, Microsoft will give you 30 days, but after that, they'll turn you off. So again, having your a backup or having data in two places just gives you that fidelity. Again, just something happened, whether it's a simple billing issue, or Microsoft is having an outage. They've had a couple in the past 45 days that have been pretty significant. Again, just giving you the ability to not lose sleep over the fact that your data is in two places is always a positive. And these backup solutions that I'm referring to are pennies on the dollar. They are super affordable, super inexpensive. And again, I look at it as it's more expensive, if you look at the cost of not doing business versus the cost of doing business. So again, maintaining good backups is, from my perspective, 101 basic IT.
Well, and I do think the majority of people, like, let's use QuickBooks Online as an example. I think people don't realize they need to be backing that up, because just because they have QuickBooks Online or any software that's online, they don't realize that if it goes away for some reason, it's gone. Like, there's no, to your point, the vendor is not necessarily backing up your stuff, nor can they retrieve it if it vanishes, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any of those,
that's an important fact to not gloss over, right? Is, hey, just because it's online and it's convenient for you, to Elmer's point earlier, it's not really in some magical cloud. It's just sitting on someone else's server. So,
if you actually read any of those T's and C's, right? So, I mean, you sign up for iTunes or you sign up for, 50 pages of legalese and your eyes glaze over. But, the translation of all of that is you have no rights. You are a guest on the service, and basically it absolves the vendor from any responsibility or legal action. Like, you look at a lot of that, they prevent, class action lawsuits, right? Not related to IT, but a perfect example, right? So take a look at Uber. There was a gentleman that had used Uber Eats, had never been in an Uber ride whatsoever, but I think he and his family, got takeout one night when they were traveling. And when you sign up for Uber, it's one terms of service, right? Regardless of what they're providing. So he ordered delivery, had it delivered, not an issue. A month later, he's in an Uber, get into an accident. And I can't remember what the outcome of it, but long story short, somebody was injured and severely, to the point where needed medical and hospital and long-term care. Well, because he had signed the T's and C's, because he got McDonald's or something delivered through Uber Eats, he's now lost the ability to legally sue them or seek recourse, financial recourse in the court system for the car accident and the injuries that resulted in that. So again, any of those large vendors, Microsoft, Apple, pick your poison, it doesn't matter. Those lawyers are paid very well to transfer the liability and the risk from those organizations to you, the consumer. So, again, you see those T's and C's. It's just, that's kind of a red flag in terms of, I need to make sure I'm doing, right by, again, it's super convenient, right? Again, iTunes, iCloud, OneDrive, they're very convenient, and we all use them and consume and don't think anything of it. But again, if something happens and you can't get to your data, or again, something gets deleted from your desktop and that delete propagates to the cloud,
right?
Again, you're where are your backups, right? How are you recovering that? It's not up to Apple. It's not up to Microsoft. That's on you. So, again, very inexpensive solutions that you can kind of put it on autopilot, and you don't need to think about it. And just knowing that it's there in the event of something unfortunate is always, peace of mind in my book.
Those are all great comments. Looks like we have another question coming in from Facebook. How does Copilot handle sensitive data, and what step? I'm surprised it took 40 something minutes for somebody to bring up an AI question.
Ask
right?
an AI question, right?
All right. How does Copilot handle sensitive data, and what steps should we take to ensure AI doesn't accidentally expose information to the wrong users?
Woo!
Maybe a question for another time. Heck no, that's why we're here. Now we might continue on that conversation
Oh my God.
in the next one, but yeah,
Yeah, we
I
got
have
a
my
short
thoughts on
answer
that.
on
So,
that.
but you guys can share your thoughts. Mine is all I'm going to say is I jokingly refer to Copilot as my BFF, right? I constantly talk to it throughout the day. I have it help me, gather my thoughts that are all over the place sometimes. And I argue with it when it doesn't give me the right answer or the answer I want to hear, but it's public, right? I mean, don't put your P&L into Copilot and go, hey, how should I run my business more efficiently? I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't put any personal information. I would treat it as what it's meant for, right? Is just to use it as a base to gather thoughts and collect your thoughts or, whatever. But I wouldn't ask it personal, like, hey, this is going on. What should I do in my personal life? Or, anything that's related to my business or my clients' information or anything like that. So that's my answer. What about, I'm going to pass it to the nerds. What do you guys think?
I think Rebecca nailed it. Consider it a public environment. Don't be uploading P&Ls. Don't be uploading, payroll lists. And, you just have to consider that information it's like everything we talked about. I mean, there's no fairy dust. It's somebody else's computer. And if they're not securing their environment properly, if the business operations are shoddy and they're going to go bankrupt, I mean, you have to think like what happens if all of that goes public. And kind of, Google searches are almost the same way. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be careful. I would say treat it as a tool and keep in mind it's somebody else's computer that you're putting your data on. And I would look at the terms of service very carefully.
Yeah. Dave, did you have anything to add to that? Okay. All right. Well, let's see. We have talked for 52 minutes. I'm impressed, guys. So let's see what topics should people walk away with, I guess. Check your Office 365 environment and default. If you don't know how to, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to give you a scan and remediation for that. Let's see what else.
Yeah,
Turn on your MFA. Turn
know.
on your MFA. I know it's annoying, but it's more annoying to not turn it on. Trust me.
There's actually a checkbox in Office 365 that forces MFA on for all administrators, and it's off by default. I'm just going to throw that out there. It's off by default.
Yep. Let's see, what else did we talk about? Phishing emails, right? So we all need to be cautious of those red flags and looking into potential filters for that. What else did we talk about? How Mac users are awesome, right, Dave? How you should back up your data, and if it's in the cloud, you still need to back it up.
Wherever it is.
Wherever it
is.
Thank you.
Back it up 3 times.
That's why you're here, Elmer. All right, cool. And look forward to, we're going to be doing these sessions every third Thursday at noon. And we hope that you guys join us again and tell your friends and have more questions for us for next time. And we're also going to have some guest speakers occasionally. So I know this time we were trying to get Samantha Brito from Regions Bank because she's definitely been seeing an uptick in scams with some of her banking clients that we're going to discuss. And so hopefully she can join us next month, talk about that. And maybe some some guests from our vendors to talk about more security. But anytime you got whatever you guys want to talk about, we're here to talk about. That's the goal. Is we want you guys to feel like you have a safe place to ask any question. There is not the only dumb question is to not ask one, or whatever that saying is. What's the saying, Elmer? I know you probably know that.
You just made me draw a blank. There's
right.
no such thing as a bad question. Let's say that.
So I will wrap it up on that unscripted note. All right. So appreciate everybody for joining, and we will chat next month. Bye, guys.
Been fun. Thanks.